I'm Ray Day. I have the honor of being the 2025 chair of PRSA, and I am joining today from the campus of Wayne State University with the capstone undergrad students who are studying communications and PR. And their topic this week, coincidentally, is DE&I. And it felt really appropriate to join these students, many of whom are PRSA students, to talk about this important topic. Again, as a reminder, the second Monday of every month, we focus on a topic with data, and then we have Q&A. And today we're going to give a couple updates on PRSA. We're going to focus on DE&I. Hopefully, those of you in PRSA saw a note we put out this morning, an open letter to not just us, not just our profession, but to the world, to let the world know we are doubling down on DE&I. We're not changing our acronym, we're not changing our name, and we're going to help navigations leaders navigation. We're going to help communications people navigate through this in the coming months and weeks. I've already set this up, but Michael Maslansky is someone who I've had the honor to get to know. I co-chair a Chief Communications Officer Forum with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we bring communications leaders together in a small group once a month just to talk about what's going on in the world, what are we stumbling on, what's troubling us. And often we are talking about chaos, we're talking about confusion. One of the pieces of research that a lot of us have looked at is when we use acronyms, or when we use the term ESG and DEI, people are responding negatively to it. But then when you unpack that, people have a different view. So Michael has become a good friend to us at PRSA and the communications community at large. He has some data about how to communicate in times of chaos like we have today. And then what are the words that matter? And then how to pick the right words to eliminate the division we have from a communication standpoint, particularly from a business standpoint. Businesses are worried, organizations are worried about being blamed right now for higher prices and being blamed and then having a negative impact on reputation. What is your advice from a communications and a messaging standpoint, a narrative standpoint? How do we navigate through this price inflation environment today?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ray. And I would say I'm at most organizations, their kind of predisposition is to say, well, it's not our fault. So how do we effectively kind of shift the blame to somebody else, to the Trump administration? It's very hard to make that work, I would say. I think it is how well do you communicate an idea? How effectively do you convey it with the words, framing, language that you use? And so we think that that's really important. About 2 years ago, we started looking specifically at the challenge of ESG. It was in the middle of the anti-woke backlash. And the question that we wanted to ask was, what if ESG is not the problem that was causing all this backlash, but instead it was the language of ESG, that in fact it was not being communicated effectively. And what we learned, and what we believe really strongly, is that right now, the biggest problem with ESG is the way that it's framed. And part of the reason demonized. In fact, this idea that empty terms that don't speak for themselves, acronyms, become easy targets is something that we've seen a lot. So we've now tested many different terms in this context. But one of the things that we look at is how politically coded is language. How strongly do people associate a term, in this case, an acronym, with an agenda, either on the right or the left? What you see here is for ESG, about half associated with a progressive agenda, many fewer on the right, about 1 in 5 in the middle. DEI seen as even more politically coded. But again, if you take a term like responsible business, you find a term that doesn't have a particular partisan affiliation. What this chart shows in the green boxes is that Democrats think that responsible business promotes a progressive agenda. Republicans think that it promotes a conservative agenda. And in the middle, independents think that it's moderate. which from a communication perspective, if you are trying to convey an idea that is not meant to be political, and you can find a term that everybody can see themselves in, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, then you have identified a really effective term for communicating.
This is a story about who's working for the Vladimir Putin Russian government in the United States and in Washington, D.C. in particular. The Department of Justice requires you under the Foreign Agents Registration Act to actually register and disclose your contracts, a lot of details about what it is that you're doing if you're working for a foreign entity or foreign government.